I knew you could see me. Those 6 words, spoken by a child trembling with fear, clinging to my legs, changed everything that morning. And the saddest part, it took that point for the whole street to understand that I was never the gossip they said I was. I always knew that one day the truth would come out, but not like that. My name is Donna Lourdes. I am 68 years old, and for years the whole street pointed the finger at me. Every time I put my chair on the sidewalk, the whispers would start. There she goes, the old woman who knows everyone's business. Be careful. She sees everything. That one's always spying. I pretended not to hear, but I heard. I did hear, and it hurt more than anyone can imagine. The children imitated me with their hands on their foreheads, as if they were spying. The adults looked away, as if I carried some kind of social poison. And I sat down, took a deep breath, and stayed there, quiet, looking out the window, as I always did. They thought I was watching their lives, that I wanted gossip, drama, trouble. But nobody, absolutely nobody, had any idea of the real reason. I could have explained. I could have told them. I could have said, I'm not looking at you. But I kept quiet. I kept quiet because the truth wasn't about me. It was about who I was trying to protect. And everything got even worse the day a neighbor humiliated me in front of everyone, pointing her finger, laughing, saying I was the old lady who has nothing better to do than watch other people's lives. I almost gave up that day. I almost closed the window forever. But that same night, I saw something that nobody else saw. Something that made me promise myself that, even if humiliated, I wouldn't stop. Because I wasn't watching other people's lives. I was watching a life that nobody else saw. And when the worst happened, when that boy ran into the street, bleeding, crying, begging for help, it was to me that he ran. And it was there, exactly at that moment, that the whole street discovered who I really was. I grew up in a humble house. One of those where the noise of the street seeps in through the cracks and you learn early on to observe the world to understand where you're stepping. My mother used to say I had eyes that could see far. It wasn't curiosity, it was survival. When I got married, I thought my life would be noisier, fuller, more alive. But it wasn't. I lost my husband too soon to accept it, too late to fix anything. After that, my days became silent. My children went on with their lives in other cities, and I was left alone. The house became too big, the hallways too long, the clock too loud, and the window became my companion. I would sit there because somehow, looking at the street reminded me that the world still existed. And even if no one spoke to me, I still had something to observe, some movement, some distant voice. Over time, I began to notice details that no one else noticed. The neighbor on the corner always left in a hurry. The girl from the greenhouse cried softly from time to time. The children played, fought, grew up. And I was there from my silent post, watching that little piece of life. Until one day, I saw something different. It was a new boy on the street, about 7 or 8 years old maybe. Too thin, too quiet, always looking down. He didn't talk to anyone. He didn't play with the other children. He didn't smile. He appeared at his window as if afraid of the very air. And I began to notice that there was something in his eyes, a mixture of weariness and a cry for help. I observed this boy not because I wanted to know about other people's lives, but because something in him triggered an alarm inside me. It was as if my soul recognized that pain, as if I had seen that kind of fear before in the eyes of someone I loved and couldn't save. I never told anyone this, but I lost a sister when I was young, and to this day I carry the weight of not having noticed the signs sooner. When I saw that boy, I swore I wouldn't repeat the same mistake. I would observe, I would watch, I would be there for him, even without him knowing. And that's why I started spending more time at the window. Not for gossip, not for fun, not out of malice, but out of an instinct that only those who have lost someone understand. And when I realized that his behavior was getting stranger, sadder, more frightened every day, I was sure he needs someone to see. And I saw everything that nobody wanted to look at. I saw what the neighbors were too blind to see, or perhaps too busy. And it was at this point in the story that I began to carry a secret inside me. I knew that boy was in danger, but trying to protect him cost me my reputation, my name, my peace. and almost cost me the courage to keep looking out the window. The days began to repeat themselves like chapters of a book that only I read. I would wake up, make my coffee, get a simple piece of bread with butter, and then go to the window. Not because I wanted to gossip about other people's lives, but because that window was the only place where I still felt useful. The neighborhood remained the same. The usual laughter, the snide remarks, the jokes that reached my ears like needles. There she is again. She must be counting how many times we breathe. Old gossip. She has nothing better to do. I pretended not to hear, but nobody imagines the work it takes to pretend. The truth is that each of those words entered me like a small cut, and a small cut, accumulated over the days, also bleeds. Even so, there I was, my gaze fixed on the boy from the house behind. He always seemed smaller than the day before, more withdrawn, quieter. Sometimes he appeared in clothes that were too baggy, sometimes with bruises that he tried to hide. Sometimes he simply didn't go outside, and that made me uneasy. I noticed that he had no friends. The children avoided playing with him, and he even seemed afraid of them. And there was something worse, something that tightened my chest every morning. He never smiled. Never. The adults in his house? They made noise, shouting, arguments, doors slamming. But with the boy, silence. Cold silence. A silence that hurts. And that's when I started to notice a pattern. Every time I sat on the sidewalk just to catch my breath, some neighbor would pass by and spew venom. Get away from the window, Mrs. Lurds. Nobody wants an audience. She must be writing everything down to go around telling everyone. That way she'll die dry alone, without anyone. It was funny, or perhaps sad, how so many people were absolutely certain of who I was, when nobody ever even stopped to ask my full name. But I had no choice. I needed to keep looking, because if I didn't look, nobody would look. I started to notice that the boy always shrugged when a certain man arrived home. And when that man arrived, the house lights went out too quickly. I never heard laughter, playfulness, conversation, affection, nothing. Just a child trying to disappear inside his own house. And the more I saw, the more I felt that something terrible was happening in there. But every time I tried to observe a little more, someone came to humiliate me. One day I just put my chair on the sidewalk to get some sun, and a woman shouted from the gate, "Look, everyone, the human security camera has arrived." Laughter. Everyone looked at me as if I were a walking nuisance. And me? I pressed my hands in my lap. I kept my eyes down, and I went back inside. But that same night, I saw the boy in the yard, alone, crying, desperately trying to dry his face before someone saw. That's when I understood, if I stopped, if I let shame silence me, no one else would see that crying. No one else would notice that fear. No one. So, in the silence of my living room, I whispered to myself, if no one looks after him, I will. And that's how the hardest part of this story began. I'll never forget the day the whole street decided to put me in the center of shame. It feels like it was yesterday, and at the same time, it feels like it was in another life. It was late afternoon. The sky was half orange, half gray, that way that makes you not know if it's going to rain or not. I just wanted to get some fresh air, so I took my chair to the sidewalk, as I've always done in recent years. I sat down slowly, adjusted my blanket on my legs, and looked at the street. But in truth, I was just looking for the boy. I knew he would appear any minute, because that's when he tried to play alone in the yard when the man of the house hadn't arrived yet. I didn't even notice that a group of neighbors were on the other side of the street watching me. I only noticed when I heard my name said in the most acidic way possible. Hey, look, there's Mrs. Lurds, ready to write down other people's lives. It must be her hobby. She probably doesn't even have anything to do inside the house. They laughed so loudly, that even passers-by turned to look. One of them crossed the street, hands on her hips, and shouted, "Mrs. Lurds, why do you live by the window? Huh? Are you minding your own business or other people's?" I felt my face burn. At that moment, I wished I could disappear, vanish, turn to dust. Everyone nearby stopped to watch the scene. Even the children stood there watching, laughing, nudging each other. "Wow, she must have a notebook just for gossip," said another woman. "It looks like it." More laughter. I felt my hands trembling. I tried to open my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. The lump in my throat was so big it felt like I had swallowed a piece of metal. I wanted to say, I'm just looking after someone. I'm just watching over a child. I'm just trying to help. But I knew, if I said anything, besides not believing me, they would laugh even more. So I remained silent. A silence that hurt more than any words. That's when the most venomous woman on the street decided to cut off what little dignity I had left. She pointed her finger in my face and said, very loudly, "Listen up, lady. Nobody wants you spying on anything. Stop being a gossip. Go find something to do." The whole street burst into laughter. Children, adults, even the elderly. I felt my legs were going to give way. But I stayed there, firm, or at least trying to appear firm. When I finally managed to muster the courage to get up, I heard someone comment, "I bet she spends the day looking out the window to see if she can find out anything about the house in the back." My heart stopped for a second. They had an idea, but they had no clue about the truth. I wanted to scream. If I hadn't looked at that house, that boy would have already died. But I couldn't. I went back inside as fast as I could. I closed the door. I rested my forehead against it. And I cried. I cried with such deep shame that it felt like I was a child being exposed in the schoolyard. I cried because they called me something I never was. I cried because my name became synonymous with mockery. And I cried because, for a moment, I thought about giving up. Giving up on the window. Giving up on the street. Giving up on the boy. Maybe I'm doing it wrong, I thought. Maybe I shouldn't get involved. That night, I didn't sit on the sidewalk. I didn't look out the window. I stood in the living room, with the lights off, trying to shrink inside myself. But God has strange ways of speaking to us. And sometimes He speaks through images that hurt. Because when I finally took a deep breath and went to the window, even though I was afraid, I saw the boy in the yard, alone, crying, his face hidden in his arm, trying to shrink as if he wanted to disappear. And there, in that image, my heart made a decision before my mind. I murmured, tears streaming down my face, "I can't stop. He needs me." And at that exact moment, I promised that, regardless of the humiliations, I would continue watching. Not street life, not adult life, but his life. The only life that truly needed someone. After that day, I was never the same. I woke up feeling like the whole world was pointing a finger at me. It felt like the humiliation had stuck to my skin, like a stain I couldn't get rid of. For years I'd gotten used to whispers, to jokes. But what happened that afternoon was different. It was as if the whole street had decided, all at once, to turn me into someone ridiculous. And for the first time, I felt like disappearing. I spent the following days avoiding the window, the gate, the sidewalk. The curtain stayed closed almost all day. I would sit on the edge of the bed and stay there, staring at the floor, as if my soul had shrunk. I thought about everything they said. I thought about the laughter. I thought about the looks of contempt. And I thought about one thing that hurt more than anything else. What if they're right? What if I'm really going too far? I felt old, tired, lost. A woman alone, without a husband, without children nearby, without anyone to defend my side of the story. It was easy to believe what the street said. It was easy to believe that I was a gossip, a meddling old woman, someone everyone mocked. I almost gave up on everything. I almost convinced my heart that it wasn't worth carrying this responsibility that no one asked of me. But when the loneliness hurt too much, I remembered him. The boy, that sad little face I saw every late afternoon. The eyes that didn't shine like other children's. The way he would shrink when he heard a noise inside the house. The way he walked looking at his own feet, as if he were afraid to exist. These memories were the only things that prevented my chest from collapsing completely. Even so, doubt not at me. Am I exaggerating? Am I making things up in my head? What if I'm seeing things wrong? What if I report him and destroy the life of an innocent person? Fear paralyzed me. Fear of making a mistake. Fear of being accused. Fear of worsening the boy's situation. Fear of saying something without absolute certainty. In the following days, I noticed that the boy didn't appear in the yard. No movement, no noise, no shadow. On the first day, I thought it was a coincidence. On the second, I thought maybe it was raining heavily. On the third, my heart was already terrified. I would get out of bed, go to the window, opened just a tiny bit of the curtain and observed the silent house. Nothing. No clothes on the line. No toys scattered around. No lights on. No voices. I tried to calm myself down. I tried to tell myself that he must be okay. But the more time passed, the tighter my chest felt. On the fourth day, I barely ate. On the fifth, I couldn't sleep. Every noise in the street made me go to the door, thinking it might be him. Nothing. I started to imagine the worst. My heart conjured up the worst possible images, each more painful than the last. That's when I understood something. I could accept being called a gossip. I could accept the mockery, the humiliation, the contempt. But I could not accept that that boy was suffering and that I remained silent. Still, the courage wouldn't come. I was fragile, hurt, too tired to face the entire neighborhood, the boy's family, the police, the world. But on Friday night, something happened. I was sitting on the sofa, with the light off. The house was so quiet I could hear my own weak heartbeat. Suddenly, a sound tore through the silence. A scream. A scream so loud, so desperate, so full of pain, that the air left my chest. I stood up so quickly I barely felt my feet touch the ground. I ran to the window. The sound was coming from the boy's house. And in that second, all doubt, all fear, all shame disappeared. My body moved on its own. I opened the door. I ran out into the street like I hadn't run in years. And I realized that scream. It wasn't one of physical pain. It was a cry for help. It was a cry of fear. It was the cry of someone who had no one left. I looked at his house. The lights were off. The whole street was asleep. Only I had heard it. Only me. And it was there, in that cold dawn, that I understood the hardest truth of all. I was the only person looking out for him. The only one who knew. The only one paying attention. The only one who couldn't ignore it. The street could call me whatever it wanted. But at that moment, only one thing mattered. I needed to save that boy. Because, if I did nothing, nobody would. That dawn, everything happened so fast and so slow at the same time that it felt like my heart skipped a beat. As soon as I heard the scream, I ran outside as if my feet knew the way before I did. The street was almost completely dark. Only the faint light of a flickering street lamp illuminated half the sidewalk. The icy wind cut my face, but I didn't even feel it. The neighbors, all asleep. The houses, all silent. The whole world seemed extinguished. Except for me. Except for the boy. It seemed that on that night only the two of us existed. When I got close to the house, I heard another sound. A muffled noise, a sob, a cry for help almost swallowed by fear. My body trembled. My God, he's in there. I banged on the gate with all my might. Hey, is anyone there? Wake up. Nothing. Silence. The kind of silence that chills the soul. I banged again harder. My fist ached, but I kept going. Open this door. I screamed so loud it sounded like another person speaking through my mouth. That's when I saw a small shadow running into the yard. A small, quick, trembling figure. It was him. The boy. And when his eyes met mine, my heart stopped. He was crying, desperate, scared, and hurt, and help. His voice, that thin, broken, pleading voice, I will never forget it. At that moment, all the weight I had carried for months, all the laughter, humiliation, insults vanished. Nothing else mattered except getting him out of there. I ran to the gate and began to force the lock with my hands. My fingers slipped. Rust scratched my skin, but I pulled with all the strength in my body. Stay there, my son. Don't leave. I'm going to get you out. He tried to answer, but his sobs choked his words. That's when I realized I couldn't do it alone. I ran into the middle of the street and started shouting, "Wake up! There's a child in danger. For God's sake, wake up!" The lights began to turn on gradually. First one house, then another, then another. Doors opened. People appeared. And for the first time in a long time, they looked at me without contempt, without jokes, without mockery. They looked as if to say, she was right all along. Quickly, some neighbors ran to the gate. Others stood there, shocked, trying to understand. One of them called the police. Another called an ambulance. I didn't leave the front of the gate, not for a second. Hold on tight, my dear. Help is on its way. When the police car turned the corner, my legs almost gave way. The police officers got out and tried to open the gate, but they couldn't either. Then one of them shouted, break it down. And with a strong kick, the gate opened. The boy ran straight to me, as if I were the only safe haven in the whole world. He grabbed my legs so hard that I felt his body tremble. And then he said the phrase that took all the air out of my lungs. "I knew you could see me. Nobody else could." My eyes filled with tears. My heart almost collapsed. I bent down, hugged that skinny boy, and felt him sob against my shoulder. Behind us, the police entered the house, and what they found inside made the whole street freeze inside. Shouts, raised voices, chaos. The neighbors, once so quick to laugh at me, were now in utter shock. The boy's family tried to justify it, invent stories, say it was a lie, that he was too sensitive. But the police saw what they saw. Marks on his body, school delays, signs of neglect, signs of aggression. And nobody, absolutely nobody, knew anything. Nobody, except me. Me, the old woman who spent her days at the window. Me, the woman they called a gossip. Me, the street joke. Me, the idle person who had nothing better to do. I was the only one who saw the boy, the only one who cared, the only one who paid attention. And now, everyone knew. When the police took the boy to the ambulance, he held my hand so tightly it seemed like he was afraid of losing me. I climbed in with him, and as the car drove away, I looked out the window and saw a scene that had taken months to unfold. The entire neighborhood silent, heads bowed, shame, regret. Nobody dared to look me in the eye. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't ashamed of who I was. I felt proud, because that morning, I didn't just save a child, I saved my own heart. And I also saved that entire street from continuing to pretend not to see what was right in front of them. In the days that followed that morning, my street, that same street that turned its face away from me, that called me a gossip, that laughed when I put my chair on the sidewalk, no longer seemed the same. And to tell the truth, neither was I. The next morning, when I returned from the hospital after accompanying the boy to be taken in by social workers, the whole street was awake. People on the sidewalk, doors ajar, looks that were once crooked, were now shy, almost ashamed. I walked slowly, still tired, still trembling inside, still with my eyes swollen from crying so much that morning. And as soon as I put my foot on the sidewalk, I heard the first call, "Mrs. Lourdes, could you come here for a minute?" I stopped. My heart beat differently, as if protecting itself. It was the neighbor who, for months, had led the chorus of jokes. The same one who said I had nothing better to do with my life. The same one who sent her son to imitate me by spying on the street. She came walking slowly, holding a dish towel in her hands as if it were a shield. I wanted to apologize. Her voice came out weak, twisted, almost swallowed by shame. She took a deep breath, her eyes welling up. I didn't know. Nobody knew. We judged wrongly, very wrongly. I didn't know what to answer, so I just nodded. Soon after, another neighbor approached. Then another, and another, and another. A line of people formed, all saying the same thing. "Sorry, we didn't understand. We were unfair," I confess. Part of me wanted to remember each of the humiliations, all the times I was the butt of jokes. Part of me wanted to say, "Now you come? Now?" But a larger part of me, the part I always had, could only think about the boy. And because of him, I didn't hold a grudge. I just said, "The important thing is that he's safe now." Some people cried. Others lowered their eyes. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen, not as a joke, not as a burden, not as the subject of gossip, but as someone who did what needed to be done. In the following days, I realized that the silence had changed its tone. It was no longer contempt, it was respect. People who never said good morning to me started to. People who had never told me my name began to call me affectionately. Children knocked on my door to ask if I needed help with shopping. Neighbors started leaving fruit, bread, cake on my gate. Nothing excessive. It wasn't flattery. It was sincere remorse. And for the first time since my husband died, I felt like I belonged there. And the boy? He was taken to a safe shelter. He received care, food, attention. And for the first time in a long time, someone looked at him with true love. The social workers made it clear, "He asks about you every day." And one day, they called me to visit him. When he saw me come in, he ran just like he had that morning, only now with a smile. I knew you would come." I cried so hard I had to lean against the wall. We sat there on the floor, talking about simple things: drawings, school, the dog, silly childhood dreams. And I realized that even without blood ties, that boy had become a part of my life. A few days later, a neighbor asked me, "Mrs. Lourdes, are you going to keep looking out the window?" I smiled slightly, sat in my chair, straightened my posture, and replied, "Yes, I will." But now, you know why. And at that exact moment, no one laughed. No one mocked. No one whispered. For the first time, they respected me because they understood that what was gossip to them was care to me. It was protection. It was love. And me? I felt liberated. Liberated from the label, from the shame, from the imposed loneliness, from the judgment of others. I was no longer the old gossip. I was the woman who saw what no one wanted to see. The woman who ran when everyone was asleep. The woman who saved a life with the only thing she had: attention, a gaze, courage. And when I sat by the window again, not to watch, but to breathe the wind, I noticed something I never thought I would see: people passing by and smiling at me. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled back. You know, after everything that happened, I spent many nights sitting in my chair, looking at the street that saw me humiliated, judged, and then respected. And something kept echoing inside my chest, like a warning, like a reminder that life wanted to leave for me and maybe for you too. We never know what the other person carries in silence. I was called a gossip, a busybody, an old woman with nothing better to do, when in fact, I was saving someone. And that made me think about how many times, throughout my life, I too have judged someone without knowing the whole story. How many times have I looked from afar, without understanding what was behind that sad look, that strange attitude, that prolonged silence? We learn, sooner or later, that the world is full of people suffering in silence, full of people trying to be strong, full of people doing what they can not to show off, but to protect someone. And the saddest thing is that many people prefer to laugh, point, judge, rather than ask, "Are you okay? Do you need help? Why are you acting like this?" Today, when I look out the window, I no longer see the street that hurt me. I see the street that learned from me. I see people who understood, in the hardest way possible, that not everything is as it seems. And if I can give you one piece of advice, you who are listening to this story now, it is this: before judging someone, try to see what the eyes don't show. Because sometimes, the person you think is hindering you is exactly the one saving a life. And now I ask you, from the bottom of my heart, have you ever labeled someone without knowing their whole story? Or have you ever been judged for something no one understood? Share with me in the comments. I want to read. I want to hear. I want this space to be a place where people finally truly see each other. And please, like this video, comment, and follow our channel. Because together, we're building a community of women who care, protect, and support even when the world doesn't understand. And I will still tell you many more stories like this. Stories of ordinary people, but with giant hearts. Thank you for listening. Truly.